Welcome to Preview Review. This is a new series that we're starting where we'll be giving you just short little reviews of things that are currently coming out. Just because we've got our finger on the pulse of the video game world. Well, I am Peter.
And Ryan's here.
And as you can tell from the little link that you clicked, we're going to be talking about Cadence of Hyrule today, which as of this recording has been out for almost 24 hours or maybe a little bit over that. So, Ryan, what did you think? Any initial impressions?
I enjoyed it a lot. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about what your history with these types of games are.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I really love both kind of. So Cadence of Hyrule is kind of a combination of Crypt of the Necrodancer, which is an indie game that came out a couple of years ago by Brace Yourself Studios and The Legend of Zelda. And Crypt of the Necrodancer is a really fun indie RPG roguelike where the only way you can move is by moving to the beat of music, and everything is kind of themed after that. And I've played a ton of that game. And of course, like anybody has, I've played a fair bit of Zelda too.
Yeah, as far as I go, a lot of Zelda. As far as the beat games go, played a little bit of Necrodancer a couple days beforehand, just kind of get the feel of it all. Other than that, my rhythm games, not a lot of experience. I've done DDR in the past, and maybe Stepmania, but other than that, not a big rhythm game type of person normally.
Yeah, that's fair. One of the things that I really liked about Crypt of the Necrodancer, or a couple things. One, it's an interesting spin on the roguelike formula. I think about the same time that it came out, there were a lot of different kind of similar things in that they take the roguelike concept and they just tweak it a little bit.
It's the kind of roguelike that I like, where you have the option of adding things to the dungeon, but you also have the things that you carry with you at all times. Which I hate the ones that always start you back and it's completely RNG. This one eliminates some of the RNG, which, again, what I look for.
Yeah, it's one, there's a permadeath system, but there are some persistent unlocks the more you play it and kind of the deeper in you go. Yeah, it's a really good game. It's also one of those games that is completely winnable. All of the enemies always follow the exact same rules, so it really does feel like you're learning and you're getting better at it. But so I'm a big fan of both of these games, and I was really excited when Cadence of Hyrule was announced, because it's really kind of unprecedented that Nintendo is turning over development of one of its big IPs to such a tiny Western studio.
I think the whole community was shocked at that, so definitely.
Yeah, and Miyamoto and a couple other of the bigwigs at Nintendo apparently loved Crypt of the Necrodancer, and when Brace Yourself wanted to add some DLC to the Switch version of Crypt of the Necrodancer, they were like, why don't you just make a Zelda sequel? So how much have you gotten to play so far?
Well, I got through first dungeon, as you're going to see some video here of that, I assume. And a lot of fun. Again, going back to what I like about the roguelikes is that they you go back and you have some things that you can carry with you on the next death. This does that a lot. It's much more adventure oriented than the roguelike oriented, because when you die, you go back to a save spot. It is very much less roguelike, but very much more of a Zelda game, with of course all the beat mechanics and all of that. So again, I enjoyed it a lot, probably a lot more than I liked the Necrodancer, but then I've played them about the same amount at this time. But again, that's more my style. I'm also not a big roguelike type player either. That's more your genre, Pete.
That's absolutely true. And I do definitely agree that it feels more like a Zelda game than Crypt of the Necrodancer. Basically, exactly because of what Ryan was saying, that although you do lose some of your items, your rupees, your torch, your shovel, a couple of the kind of very standard items, things like health, your weapons are persistent throughout. And the things that you lose are honestly not very important. They're very easy. It's very easy to get money in this game. It's very easy to kind of recoup everything you've lost. I've never died and felt like I've lost all this stuff, which definitely could happen in a run of Crypt of the Necrodancer or any roguelike.
Yeah, I know some are just so much more punishing than this, and again, I really like that aspect.
Yeah, I guess I kind of think of it as like if I'm like imagining the super old Reese's commercial where someone's like holding peanut butter and the other person's holding chocolate and they smash together and like, oh, this great thing is created. It is like that, but it's like very heavy on the chocolate compared to the peanut butter. Maybe I was just expecting more Necrodancer stuff.
I see it as the opposite. I see it as more peanut butter and chocolate.
That's fair. I would agree with those kind of thoughts. I actually would say I was surprised by a couple things, and I guess this is both kind of my initial impressions and kind of the high points and low points. It's like a really good celebration of both games, and I like that Cadence is like one of the characters you start out with, and you've got to choose between Link and Zelda pretty early. It integrates the musical theme very well. So one of the things that I think Crypt of the Necrodancer does that is not necessarily like good or funny, but I love, is that all of the bosses and all of the enemies, all of their names are somehow like musical puns. So for instance, you've got like King Konga. He's one of the bosses. All of his music is like, it's conga. It's a conga. And he's obviously like a giant ape. And it's kind of cheesy, but I always love seeing how they implement those. And also the way it makes it always matches both the way the boss fights. So for instance, King Konga has like a conga line of enemies that attack you. It speaks to the pun-loving dad in me. And I don't feel like Cadence of Hyrule like integrates that as well, or it doesn't seem like it has as many. Okay, some of them are pretty good. I will say one of the bosses, his name is Wizrobo, like Wizrobe and Oboe, which maybe it's just that I'm not as familiar with the Zelda enemy names, because it does look like they are all puns. Bass Guitaramos Knights, Gore Maracas, Glockenspiel. Alright, so maybe they do integrate it, and I'm not Zelda literate enough to pick up on all the good puns. One other thing that I did want to mention, something that is just beautiful about the game is the super good sprite work. It's something that was good in Crypt of the Necrodancer, but it is so much stronger in this. All of the enemies look gorgeous, all the characters look gorgeous. I really enjoyed seeing a lot of the enemies from Crypt of the Necrodancer kind of redone in the Zelda style. I wish there were more of them in the Zelda style, but just beautiful. But it might be just because I've played a lot of Crypt of the Necrodancer, but Cadence of Hyrule it's very, very easy. I think if you're someone who's like familiar with these games. I've played about 2.5 hours, maybe 2 hours, closer to that, and I'm already on the last dungeon. It really does not take that long if it's kind of a familiar system to you. And that's something that's a little bit disappointing. I know that there is a permadeath mode. I don't know how much harder that makes things, and I know that there are supposedly some unlockable characters. So hopefully those make things harder. How did you find the difficulty, Ryan?
Well, I mean, I'm only about an hour in, and of course,
Yeah, which dungeon did you go to first?
It was the one with the maracas.
Yeah, that one was I think that's the easiest of them. But none of them are that much harder, I think.
Okay. It's just the one I stumbled across first, and my biggest issue, or the low point I see with this game so far, is the syncing up with the time. And I get this type of game it is, but syncing up with the sound and the monitor. I found handheld mode so much more reactive and easier. When I was playing handheld mode, I didn't miss beats, whereas on the TV version or a console version, I constantly was missing beats for one reason or another, and I don't know if that's because of a wireless controller or what it could be, but it just wasn't as crisp.
Yeah, that's a good question. I only played it in handheld mode just because a fair bit of my Switch time is on the subway. Yeah, and that's something, I mean, that's really kind of the most important part of the gameplay in a lot of ways. If that doesn't work, you're not gonna have a good time. Nothing's gonna work out. But one of the other things that I did really like, I liked hearing, of course, all of the Zelda music, like slightly remixed and just integrated into the Crypt of the Necrodancer style.
Yeah, it was beautifully remastered on several occasions. Like playing it, I can remember thinking like, wow, this is just such gorgeous music, and they did so well on that. Something
else that I'm looking forward to. I'm not completely sure if this is in the game or not, but with Crypt of the Necrodancer, once you beat it, you unlocked other characters. and the other characters had like remixed music. Some of it was a lot faster, some of it was just stranger tempos, and that does a lot in my mind to kind of just increase the replayability of the game, which it's a shorter game, it seems like at least, but if it's got a couple different characters and some challenge modes like Crypt of the Necrodancer does, that's probably enough to get rid of all my fears, all my concerns.
Yeah, I could definitely see where if it's just a few of them, a couple playthroughs can get you through and you're done with this game with several playthroughs after 10, 15 hours, if it's as short as we think it is. And that's just kind of where I'm looking at it now. However, if it does have all the extra playable characters, that could increase it greatly, especially if difficulty's also increased.
I do think a lot for me does kind of turn on how replayable the game is. Because really, like any roguelike, a lot of the fun comes from the fact that every time you play the game, it's different enemies, different items. You kind of have to adapt to it. It's all the fun of like leveling up, so to speak, in a game, but every time you play it. And one run through so far, it doesn't seem like that's quite the same here. Like for instance, once you get a good item, you're just good. Like you never need to worry about that again, which in some ways is nice and does feel more like Zelda, but also I think does, to me at least, possibly, I don't know, it limits it in some way. But maybe the permanent death will fix that for me. So I think depending, it'll be something I return to. As of right now, I admit I'm slightly disappointed in it overall. I think it's a cooler idea than an execution. Just maybe that the peanut butter and chocolate flavors don't go as well together, kind of. It might be one that I turn around on. It's definitely one I'm going to play a bit more. What'd you think, Ryan?
What would you rate it? Well, let's see what you rated. What would you give the cost of it?
The cost is $25. Honestly, if it was $15, I think that would be kind of the ideal premium price point. You're always going to be paying that Switch tax, and it is a first-party Nintendo title. But in terms of like the game, I'd say that's probably how much it's worth. You do get really good music. It is a cool idea. If you were a fan of Zelda and Necrodancer, I think it's worth checking out. But if you're a fan of those things, you've probably picked it up already. People were real excited about this game.
Yeah, I was gonna put this one on the back burner until you kind of talked about it a little more, and Necrodancer's down to $4, and I played that for a couple of minutes and was like, yeah, I'll put the $25 worth towards this game and see what it's like. Based on my interaction with it so far, I'd say 20 is what I'd probably pay for it. Again, with the Nintendo Premium, you kind of got to add that in. But on that note, anything lower than 20, and I would say an absolute buy, because this is a fun little game.
Yeah, I think a fun little game is a good description for it. I would not disagree with that at all. But yeah, if it's something you're not sure that you're interested in, as Ryan mentioned, Crypt of the Necrodancer is like $4 on the Switch right now, and it goes on sale on Steam as well pretty often. I'd say pick that up first. I think that is an amazing indie game. If you love the format of that and just need Zelda for it, Cadence of Hyrule is for you. So yeah, I think that's all we've got for this preview review. I think we're going to talk about Crypt of the Necrodancer a bit more in another video coming up, but we'll have the whole ensemble cast assembled for that. Any other parting thoughts, Ryan?
I think we're good there. Thanks for the time, Pete, and looking forward to talking to everybody again soon.
Bye.